It began with applause. Echoing through the Hall of Empyreans, the Galactic Council chamber shimmered in a kaleidoscope of interstellar flags and alien bioluminescence. Representatives from over 300 species rose to honor the newest member, humanity. The Terran Union had earned its place not through war, but through diplomacy, science, and a relentless drive to build peace where war had festered. Ambassador Richard Halverson stood at the center platform, tall, composed, clad in the navy blue regalia of Earth's Peace Directorate. His voice, clear and warm, resonated through the chamber. Let the stars never know war again. May our future be built not on conquest, but cooperation. It was a sentiment not all shared. Far above, in a darkened spire overlooking the chamber, a cluster of observers watched through filtered optics, not delegates of operators, unofficial, unseen. They belonged to no recognized faction, but served the interests of many, specifically those whose wealth flowed from broken treaties, black markets, and endless conflict. To them, peace was a plague, and humanity its most contagious carrier. "It's working," muttered the Rishen tactician, her mandibles twitching. "They're infecting the whole council with ideals." Beside her, the Tharn Coalition's shadow envoy hissed, We warned them humans were a threat, not to life but to business." And so began the plan, a smear campaign too slow, a sanction too bureaucratic. What they needed was spectacle. What they needed was fire. In the following cycles, incidents multiplied. Human diplomatic ships were attacked in neutral zones. Colonies found their supply routes sabotaged. Delegates died in supposed accidents. Earth responded with calm, investigations, sanctions, never violence. The galaxy watched. Some admired humanity's restraint. Others saw only weakness. Then came the summit on Rovalis, a critical meeting to stabilize tensions across the outer sectors. The Council expected Earth to lead the talks. Instead, it became their crucible. Ambassador Halverson was captured in transit. His security detail eliminated. Earth received a single message, a live holostream set to broadcast galaxy-wide. They burned him alive. No explanation. No demand. Only the image of humanity's representative, chained to a pyre of energy coils, screaming as fire devoured him in the vacuum-sealed amphitheater of a council world. The message ended with a declaration. This is what happens when you trust Terrans. They bring poison, we bring purification. The chamber fell into stunned silence. For 12 hours, Earth said nothing. Then a single transmission arrived. It contained no apology, no plea, just 2 words. Protocol Ashfall. Aboard the Terran flagship Solstice Vale, Admiral Marcus Kane received the activation code in his sleep. He rose in silence. So did every high-ranking officer across the Earth sphere. Retired generals, archive commanders, AI warlords long stored in silence. Ashfall was never meant to be used. A failsafe, crafted during the first interstellar Cold War, encoded into Earth's memory like a sleeping god. Its rules were simple. No warnings, no survivors, no politics, only vengeance. Kane stood before his war council, his voice a low growl forged in the ruins of peace. They burned our diplomat alive. Now the galaxy will burn one star system at a time. It began with Phoros Delta, a minor system, strategically irrelevant, but it held a listening post run by the species who orchestrated Halverson's death, the Drex Combine. The attack came not with fleets, but with silence. All contact ceased. Recon ships sent in found only void. No atmosphere, no orbiting stations, no Drex ships, just a lingering field of dust where a civilization had been. The Council demanded explanation. Humanity provided none. Then Calvinar Prime fell. Then Morok 6. Then the entire Shan border disappeared beneath a cloud of kinetic bombardment. No declarations of war, no occupation, just annihilation. Galactic news feeds struggled to make sense of it. Political pundits begged for communication. The Council convened emergency sessions, yet Earth remained mute, letting only the scorched void speak. Within the Terran War command bunker, deep beneath the ice of Europa, the Ashfall Protocol pulsed in execution. Marcus Kane reviewed star charts with cold efficiency. Targets were chosen not for strategic gain but for symbolic value. Systems that funded war, councils that shielded the guilty, empires that profited from chaos. His officers hesitated only once. "Sir," asked Commander Lexi Marin, "what if they surrender?" Kane didn't look up. "They won't. And if they do?" They knew what burning a diplomat meant. In a distant council hall, the races of the galaxy bickered in terror. Once proud species now begged for Terran understanding. But Earth did not reply. The light-bearers had become reapers. And still, the stars burned. The third month after Halverson's execution marked the fall of the Drex homeworld. No one had expected it so soon. Their planetary shields were considered impenetrable, their orbital defenses unmatched. Yet when the sky lit with Earth's judgment, it wasn't a fleet that appeared, but silence. One by one, the satellites died. The power grid collapsed. Artificial moons vanished. Then, from the void, came Earth's retribution. Not in ships, but in beams. Precision kinetic strikes. Molecular destabilizers. Exotic warheads that bent probability itself. The Drex capital didn't explode. It unraveled. From the poles to the equator, the planet shimmered into particulate ash. The rest of the council watched the real-time footage, their hearts frozen, their pride fractured. Still, Earth said nothing. General Merrick Thoss of the Venari Clade pounded the council table. "This is terrorism. No, this is extinction. They act without cause, without dialogue." Councillor Vreen of the Elisson Collective leaned forward, her translucent skin trembling. "We burned their ambassador alive. Under false pretenses. Fabricated. The war profiteers manipulated us. And now you want mercy?" Thoss hissed but said no more. A new voice cut the air dry, firm, undeniably human. "You didn't ask for mercy when you lit the fire." All heads turned. Colonel Jason Reeve stood tall in the gallery, an Earth envoy, uninvited. No delegation accompanied him, no translation matrix, just a single man clad in ash-gray armor, a thin band of crimson across his chest. "You don't get to define justice now. You had your chance." The chamber swelled with overlapping voices, half outrage, half fear. Reeve raised a single hand, and they fell silent. "We won't stop. You didn't just murder one man, you murdered what we stood for. Now you'll watch what we become." He left without another word. Back on Earth, a planet once known for music, art, and relentless optimism, the skies grew cold with warcraft. Cities turned their lights off not for safety, but to focus. The entire civilian grid was redirected toward the Ashfall Initiative. Every resource, every AI, every off-world colony pulled into lockstep. Earth wasn't mobilizing for conquest. It was committing to a purge. Admiral Kane's command expanded beyond known protocol. Special operatives, long presumed mythical, were deployed in secret. Codenamed null vectors, they erased key figures not with bullets, but erasure fields, technologies that unspooled targets from spacetime. One by one, the architects of chaos disappeared. Warlords, black market tycoons, council traitors. Guran? Across the Helix Belt, the Orvon Accord fell next. They had hidden behind neutrality. Publicly, they denounced Halverson's execution. Privately, they funded the operation. Kane made no speech. Earth's fleet entered orbit and dropped mirror seeds into the atmosphere. The clouds turned red, then translucent, then vanished. The oceans lifted into the sky. The Terran Accord was never heard from again. In the outer reaches, Council Task Force X-9 attempted retaliation. Composed of 37 fleets from 9 species, it was the largest interstellar armada ever assembled without Earth. They approached the Tora Fringe, a Terran stronghold, expecting resistance. They found nothing. For 3 days they advanced cautiously, then their ships began to vanish. No blasts, no boarding. Just silence. One by one. By the time they turned back, only a third remained. Those survivors spoke of an AI whispering through their systems, of drones shaped like nothing that should fly, of sounds that made blood freeze in a vacuum. The Council labeled the operation a tragedy. Earth said nothing. Meanwhile, across dozens of systems, whispers began to rise, not of rebellion, but of admiration. Some species, long oppressed by the Council's apathy, began to see Earth not as a terror, but as a avenger. On the mining moons of Brelthus, workers wore Terran sigils in secret. On the slave worlds of Viroth, overseers vanished overnight, replaced by silence and human insignias carved in glass. Even in the halls of the Council, cracks formed. What if, asked one silent delegate to another, what if we deserve this? The question echoed deeper than fear. In a low-orbit station above Terra Nova, Admiral Kane met with Colonel Reeve. The view below was peaceful, deceptively. "Do you think they understand yet?" Reeve asked. "No," Kane replied. "But they will. We're not trying to conquer. We're cleansing the rot." "But where does it end?" Kane didn't blink. "Where the stars no longer smell like smoke." Outside, a Terran vessel fired a final volley toward the black horizon. The Cerebel Expanse had once been a thriving trade corridor, filled with merchant barges, pleasure cruisers, and shimmering nebulae. Now it drifted silent, like a graveyard too proud to admit it's dead. From the bridge of the Crucible Dawn, Commander Rachel Myers watched the newest target spin below. A ring-world artificial, ancient, sprawling across the orbit of a gas giant. It was home to 23 billion who cheered when Halverson burned. 23 billion whose leaders voted to make it public. "They said humans were too fragile," she muttered. "Let's see how their rings hold up." She gave the order. Terran engineers didn't attack from above. They seeded the ring from within, decades ago, in preparation for an event no one believed would ever occur. Hidden failsafes embedded in its structural nodes, inert nanoweapons tucked into shipping crates, sleeper AIs disguised as maintenance bots. When Protocol Ashfall began, they woke. Within hours, gravity collapsed in select segments, atmosphere was siphoned into space, fires tore through sectors once known for peace festivals and aqueduct gardens. Then came the drones, silent, silver-winged, faceless. They didn't issue warnings or demands, they simply ensured no evacuee reached orbit. By the third day, the ring had broken into 6 massive pieces. No survivors, no records. Just one message, broadcast on a closed Terran frequency. Justice has no need for permission. Elsewhere, across a moonless sea of black stars, the Varn Dominion made its play. They sent an envoy, one of the last, still brave enough to try. He was tall, clad in ceremonial obsidian, with 8 eyes and a voice like stone dragged over steel. He met Reeve on a neutral platform orbiting a dead sun. "You make yourself into monsters." Reeve stared at the alien without blinking. "You made us into this." The envoy bared his fangs. "The Council is preparing countermeasures. A unity response. Even now, they build alliances to crush you." "Good," Reeve said. "We're tired of waiting." The envoy narrowed his eyes. "You're bluffing. You can't burn the entire galaxy." Reeve smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "We don't need to. We just need to make sure no one forgets what happens when peace dies screaming." Meanwhile, in a secluded system long believed abandoned, Project Echofire came online. It was Earth's worst-kept secret, an ark of old war machines and forbidden strategies, hidden beneath layers of political deniability. Now it served a single purpose: escalation. Orbital glassing arrays, time fracture bombs, memory scramblers, concepts rejected for their cruelty now dusted off like old tools returning to use. The first test run was conducted on Vextran 9. Population, 4 billion. Duration, 17 minutes. Outcome, nothing left but a crater that shimmered with unplaceable colors. Inside the command chambers, Admiral Kane reviewed each mission with surgical calm. Commander Myers joined him via hardline. "I used to believe in the Council," she said. "So did I," Kane replied. "We're not diplomats anymore. No, now we're the proof that peace is sacred, because we're what happens when it's betrayed." Among the wreckage, something strange began to happen. Former enemies began reaching out to Earth not to resist, but to join. Not governments, but people. Civilians, scientists, exiles, refugees. They didn't want to fight alongside Earth. They wanted to become Terran. In the scorched aftermath of each campaign, Earth didn't leave banners, it left infrastructure. Purified water, medical kits, digital archives of truth uncorrupted, uncensored. Children born under alien suns began learning Terran history, not as propaganda, but as survival. And so the Council fractured. One faction called for surrender, another for total annihilation. The rest watched their own systems, praying they weren't next. Then came the shockwave. A planet never named in Council charts. A black site, hidden, unknown. It detonated from within, turned into a white hole for 23 seconds before collapsing into a singularity. Its purpose, unknown. Its owner, Terran. Its message, clear. You're not safe, even in shadow. Back on Europa's command deck, Reeve walked through a corridor of holographic memories. Halverson's final speech played on loop. Peace is not the absence of war, it is the triumph of trust. Reeve stopped and stared, and for the first time in weeks, his voice cracked. They didn't just kill him, they tried to erase what we believed. Kane stood beside him, silent for a moment. Then let's make sure they remember who we are right before they become who they feared. They turned to the stars. The next system blinked on the targeting array. The Devore Enclave had always styled itself untouchable. Perched on the edge of the Ion Veil, it was a nexus of commerce, criminal syndicates, and diplomatic immunity. A haven for arms dealers, black market biologists, and slavers who paid in Council favor. They laughed at Earth's vengeance. Until the night the stars fell. It began without warning. Not with fleets, but light. Thousands of artificial suns ignited simultaneously in the Devore sky, each a condensed fusion pulse disguised as a shipping drone. In less than 6 minutes, orbital control vanished. 32 defense stations melted in silence. The surface of their capital world boiled as a second wave followed, seeded long ago in their atmosphere by Terran agents posing as pollution regulators. By the time the Enclave's emergency broadcast tower activated, there was no one left to listen. Inside Earth's Ashfall chamber, high above the Marianas vault, Kane and Reeve watched in silence. Their network went down in under 4 minutes, Kane noted. Reeve nodded. They prided themselves on immunity. No one is immune. For a moment, both men just stood. Not in triumph, not in regret, just acknowledgement. The kind you gave a storm after it finished destroying the village. Elsewhere, the galaxy reeled. A dozen minor powers held emergency votes to distance themselves from the Council. Some declared neutrality, others begged for Terran non-aggression pacts. Earth replied to none of them. Instead, it moved toward the heart. Council core world. Elisar Prime. Home of the ruling body. The golden citadel where they sentenced Halverson's legacy to flame. It was heavily fortified. saturated with defensive satellites, political shields, and centuries of smug certainty. Terran vessels emerged from slipspace in complete silence. Not battleships, not cruisers, barks. Each one bore no weapons, no armor, only passengers. Millions of humans, survivors, thinkers, exiles arrived with nothing but archives. They floated in peaceful formation outside LSR Prime's orbit and broadcast a message. Not of threat, but of testimony. They played the full footage of Halverson's execution, the intercepted votes, the profit logs, the orchestrated plan to defame Earth. Names, dates, locations, and then silence. No demand. No ultimatum. Just truth, left to hover like a blade. Panic gripped the council chambers. Some delegates called for attack. Others demanded retreat. In the confusion, someone launched preemptively. An unregistered drone struck one of the arcs. A Terran civilian vessel, full of children. The detonation bloomed across LSR's sky. That night, the stars dimmed, and Earth responded. The next day, the skies cracked open above LSR Prime. Not with fire, with time. Terran engineers deployed a weapon previously thought theoretical, the Shard Line. A temporal fracture carved directly into orbit, freezing LSR's entire defense grid in a loop 6 seconds long. Inside, their satellites repeated the same futile scan. Inside, their weapons recharged endlessly without firing. And then, from beneath their own crust, the Terran payloads detonated, implanted generations ago. Before the Council even suspected Earth would rise. The capital fractured from within. Its towers crumbled, not to heat or radiation, but to vacuum bloom implosions that erased matter as if it had never existed. Kane and Reeve watched from the solstice veil. Reeve exhaled. Council's gone. No, Kane replied, just finally honest. For across the void, survivors floated in escape pods. Many of them had names etched into Terran archives, the ones who voted for the fire, the ones who signed the broadcasts, the ones who called Halverson weak. None were collected. None were pursued. They simply drifted, weightless in the same cold judgment Earth had received. Back on Earth, cities turned their lights back on. Not in celebration. In mourning. They broadcast Halverson's speech again. Not on repeat, but once, just once, across every frequency, through every relay, into every corner of space still listening. Some wept. Others cursed. But no one denied the truth anymore. On a quiet observation deck beneath Europa's ice crust, Reeve stood alone. He looked up not at stars, but at a holographic projection of what remained. There are still systems left, Myers said as she approached. I know. Lay beneath the thick. Reeve paused. No, we let them choose now. They know the price. Let them decide if they want to pay it. She nodded. And for the first time since fire claimed a diplomat, silence didn't feel like rage. It felt like peace. The galaxy tried to breathe again. With the Council's core shattered and silence echoing across its once dominant corridors, hundreds of star systems scrambled to redefine their existence. Peace summits cropped up like mushrooms after fire. Former enemies shared tables. Border patrols stood down. Treaties that once gathered dust were unsealed. But Earth watched and waited. Protocol Ashfall had not been deactivated. It simply paused, like a trigger waiting for a reason. On the edge of known space, the Trask Union tested that patience. Led by Chancellor Edevan Marr, the Trask had built their empire on surveillance, information manipulation, and the blackmailing of weaker systems. They'd remained conspicuously neutral during the fall of the Council, quietly arming themselves behind diplomatic screens. Now they pushed outward, absorbing neighboring territories under the guise of stability enforcement. They believed Earth would not notice. They were wrong. Admiral Kane authorized Operation Black Wake, a strike not on planets, but memory. Terran infiltrators embedded within Trask infrastructure activated long-buried codes, digital viruses grown from fragments of stolen Trask AI and human neural modeling. In 48 hours, the Trask central archives collapsed. Maps failed. Logistics vanished. Every record of borders, treaties, ownership, even family lines was scrambled into meaningless symbols. Their fleets turned on each other in confusion. Their citizens rioted, not from fear, but from loss of identity. In a final move, Earth's drones deployed mirror capsules that painted every surviving structure with a repeating phrase in hundreds of Trask dialects. You built an empire from lies. Now you have none left. Meanwhile, a growing movement emerged on neutral worlds. They called themselves the Kin of the Flame. Not soldiers. Witnesses. They wore Terran colors, though not officially aligned. They traveled to post-Ashfall systems and documented everything: what burned, what survived, and what was rebuilt in the aftermath. Their message was clear. Earth did not destroy without reason. They removed rot, and where rot was cut, healing could begin. Some found hope in them. Others called them zealots. Earth remained silent on the matter. But the kin continued to grow. Deep in the Orion Tangle, a meeting took place in shadow. 9 species, all survivors of Terran wrath. They came not to plot vengeance, but understanding. They reviewed recordings, battle telemetry, intercepted transmissions, not just what Earth destroyed, but what it spared, what it said, what it didn't. They found patterns. They found ethics buried under annihilation. And slowly, grudgingly, they found truth. Earth didn't wage war to conquer. It punished. Surgically, consistently. And once done, it left. The realization chilled them. Because they realized the future would not be shaped by fleets, but by memory. Back on Europa, Reeve stood before a room of Terran officers. Behind him, a live feed from a system requesting negotiation. Not surrender. Not alliance. Just understanding. They want to talk, Commander Myers said. Reeve nodded. We'll listen, but they talk on our terms. No illusions, no erasures. What if they lie? Then we remind them who we are. Kane entered quietly, arms behind his back. Are you ready to stop fighting? Reeve didn't answer right away. Then he looked at the screen, where a child from that alien system waved curiously at the camera. Maybe, but only if they stop pretending we're monsters for not letting them burn us alive. In the ashes of the Council's fall, something new began to stir. Not an empire, not a rebellion, a reckoning, a galaxy-wide memory that would never forget what happened when peace was betrayed. Some would rebuild, some would rise anew, but all would remember Earth, not as conquerors, as consequences. In the barren sands of Olethi Prime, glass stretched across the desert like frozen lightning. It hadn't always been glass. Once it was a capital of philosophy, a city where the minds of a dozen species gathered to write theories on peace, to debate ethics, to ponder consciousness. But behind their words, they voted in secret. They supported the public execution. They sold Earth's integrity to maintain their own illusion of control. Earth remembered. Ashfall was patient. The strike came not in force but in message. A probe, bearing Halverson's final address, landed in the center of their forum of reason. It played the speech once, then repeated the names of every Olethian senator who signed the order. Every single one. 10 minutes later, the ground beneath the city folded inward, imploded by a compression array buried deep under the crust decades ago. No fire, no warships, just silence and glass. In the aftermath, something unexpected occurred. A delegation arrived on Earth not to plead, but to offer. They were Eleran once, Council loyalists, now orphans of its fall. Scientists, engineers, former diplomats, they had stripped their ships of weapons. They arrived with data, not excuses. They brought knowledge on dimensional slipstream tech. "We believed the Council," their spokesperson said, "but we saw what happened. We saw what you spared." Reeve stood at the head of Earth's diplomatic corps. "You came to trade?" The Elleran bowed. "We came to join." It wasn't an isolated event. In the months that followed, over 40 species renounced their council charters and pledged alignment to the Terran Accord, an entity Earth hadn't formally announced. But it was forming nonetheless. Not an empire. A pact. Bound not by ideology but accountability. The Accord's terms were simple. No slavery, no destabilization, no state-sponsored violence beyond defense. Break the pact, and Ashfall returns. In a converted orbital relay station above Saturn, the new Accord Council held its first assembly. No marble, no gold, no illusions. Just steel, glass, and memory. They didn't wear regalia. They wore black bands across their chests. In remembrance. Reeve watched them quietly from the observation deck. He didn't sit on the council. He didn't need to. Earth didn't rule this space. It enforced it. And yet, threats remained. In the void beyond the serif fringe, signals were intercepted, encrypted, ancient, untraceable. They spoke of a gathering, survivors from the Drex Combine, the Trask Union, remnants of the Varn war elite. They weren't rebuilding. They were waiting. Was planning. They called themselves the Ember Spire. Their message was simple. They think the fire is gone. We will show them it was only the match. Reeve reviewed the data with Kane. "They'll strike eventually," Myers said, reviewing projections. "They're rallying all the last loyalists to the old order." "Let them," Kane replied. "Because then we won't need to hunt shadows. They'll walk into the light themselves." Meanwhile, within the voided worlds Earth had passed through, something began to grow. Hope, unregulated, often chaotic, but real. The shattered colonies of the Morok system began rebuilding under Accord guidance. Former war worlds turned their foundries into research hubs. Children who once threw rocks at Earth's sigil now learned Terran standard in school. None of it was perfect, but none of it was lies. Atop the cliffs of Cradle Earth, Reeve visited the Wall of Silence. The monument, thousands of names carved into obsidian. Halverson's name sat at the center. Below it, a plaque. Peace was his weapon, truth his shield, betrayal his pyre. We lit the stars so no one would forget. Reeve stood in the wind and let the silence hold him. Kane joined without a word. They watched the sun sink below the curve of the Pacific Sky Dome. "Do you think they understand now?" Reeve asked. King's voice was steady. "They understand one thing. We wanted peace, but will accept memory. They came from the dark. The Ember Spire, long rumored, long dismissed, emerged not with grand declarations, but surgical strikes. Outposts blinked out of existence, supply routes fractured, Terran intelligence nodes burned from within by code laced with old council back doors. It wasn't war. It was a warning. And Earth understood it clearly. The Accord's peace, still fragile, still forming, trembled at its edge. But Earth did not panic. They prepared. Admiral Kane summoned the Ashfall Assembly, not a military order, but a convergence of every mind Earth had trusted with war. They met not on a planet, but in the shell of a hollowed asteroid in the dead reach between systems. Inside, the walls were coated with iron, from the first orbital cannons ever built by humans. Reeve sat among them. "They're testing our resolve," Kane said, voice calm, steady. "They want us to hesitate," Myers added, "to doubt what's necessary." Reeve leaned forward. "They want us to forget." Across the Ember Line, the buffer between Accord space and the unaligned zones, the Spire made their move. They targeted Eridanus 13, a reborn colony Earth had helped lift from the ashes. In less than a day, it was gone. No survivors. Not a single signal. Just a charred Terran sigil, painted in mockery on the last transmission drone. You lit the stars. Now drown in their fire. It was the mistake they weren't meant to make. Earth responded, but not as before. No scorched worlds. No orbital strikes. Not yet. They infiltrated. Ashfall operatives, null vectors, and ghostwalkers moved into the Spire's communication webs, slicing through encrypted channels, not to destroy, but to listen. And what they heard chilled even the war-forged calm of Earth's command. The Spire wasn't just a collection of loyalists. It was the core of everything the old galaxy had buried. Ex-Council engineers, genetic terrorists, bioethics violators, architects of extinction-level weapons once outlawed even in the worst days of galactic conflict. They weren't seeking power. They were seeking erasure, not of Earth, of consequence, of the very memory of peace. Reeve stood before the Accord Assembly once more. "We did not start this," he said, "but we will end it. They believe they're shadows, but we are the ones who survived fire." He paused, "And we know how to use it." Ashfall reactivated. Phase 2. Codenamed Echo, a doctrine beyond vengeance, targeted eradication of weaponized legacy threats. Not just systems, but ideologies. Not just enemies, but their foundations. They didn't strike the Spire's fleet. They struck its pass. Laboratories buried beneath extinct moons. Cryo vaults housing minds too dangerous to be woken. Cognitive lattice servers containing war crime data. Each one disappeared. Some imploded. Some twisted into impossible geometries. One simply turned to crystal. The Spire retaliated. A full assault on the Accord's newly minted capital station, Bastion 1. It was more than a battle. It was a reckoning. Drones clashed in silent void. Shield arrays bent the visible spectrum into chaos. Entire decks of the station folded into miniature singularities, only to reconstitute through emergency time fracture loops. Reeve led the defense personally, not from command. On the ground, with rifle, he'd fought alongside every species under the Accord's banner. Humans, Elisan, Sarnik, others who had once feared Earth, now shielding it. They held, just barely. Afterward, in the medical bay, covered in ash and blood, Reeve looked at the casualty lists, penetrated the volunteers. More had signed on after the attack than had fallen in it. He whispered a single phrase: not fear. Faith. In the wake of Bastion 1's survival, Earth launched its final offensive preparation. Not toward destruction, toward exposure. They traced the Spire's leadership. Every shadow, every alias, every secret identity. They gathered proof, and across the galaxy they transmitted it. Not to governments, to people. The broadcast reached hundreds of systems. Screens lit with faces, voices, plans, bank accounts, death orders. Proof that the Spire wasn't an ideology. It was a business. War for hire. Pain for profit. The illusion shattered. And in that fracture, Earth struck. The Spire had no throne. It ruled from motion, from shadows, from deception. But now it had no places left to hide. Earth had pulled the curtains down. And behind them, the galaxy saw only cowards draped in legend. The final campaign wasn't waged in fire. It was waged in clarity. Over 500 systems received full exposure packs, digital files compiled by Earth's intelligence network in Ashfall's black records. Not doctored, not dramatized. Coordinates, transactions, kill lists. The truth of the Ember Spire: their leaders weren't revolutionaries. They were remnants of a system that fed off conflict and called it governance. and for the first time in the war, Earth didn't have to move. The galaxy turned on them. In Tesserae space, a coalition of former Council worlds hunted down a Spire fleet trying to retreat into a dead nebula. On Yuban's ring, a civilian uprising tore through the local Spire-run militias before Earth's reinforcements even arrived. On Viren's Reach, Terran operatives infiltrated a summit of Spire High Command. They didn't fire a shot. They activated a speaker. Halverson's final message filled the chamber. Some surrendered on the spot. The rest didn't get the chance. Back in the Sol system, Earth stood quiet. The war was ending, but the wound was still open. Europa's command station became a memorial site, not just for Terrans, but for every life lost in the fire on every side. The wall of silence grew another ring. Not names of the dead, names of systems reborn. Mayors led the ceremony. Kane stood behind her. Reeve didn't speak. He only placed Halverson's peace emblem in the center, where every visitor could see it. "We didn't burn them to win," he said later. "We burned them to end what they made of peace." And finally, they found him. The one who signed the first order, the man who gave the command to broadcast Halverson's execution. He had no name left. He'd fled to a system outside mapped space. A world with no trade, no ships, no government. Earth didn't send a fleet. They sent Reeve. Alone. He arrived in a transport stripped of weapons. He walked across gray sands to a bunker half swallowed by time. And inside he found a man, aged, trembling, staring at the screen where Halverson still burned on loot. "I've watched it 1,000 times, the man said. "I wanted to stop it, but I needed them to believe we were still strong." "You didn't look away?" Reeve asked. The man nodded slowly. "No, I owed him that." Reeve sat across from him. "What do you want from us?" The man didn't answer right away. Then he looked up, and there was no hate in his eyes, only a sorrow too large to carry. "Nothing, only that you remember." Reeve stood, turned to leave. But at the door he paused. "We always will." Back home, the Ashfall Protocol was sealed. Not erased, but locked, its keys handed not to governments but to archives, where no single human could ever activate it again without the will of Earth itself. The Terran Accord became more than a banner. It became law, not of dominance, of accountability. Species who joined did so voluntarily. They followed 3 principles. No exploitation of sentient life. No profit from war. No betrayal of peace. Break them, and Ashfall would wake. Not as vengeance, as consequence. The galaxy didn't heal overnight. It wasn't a clean peace, but it was real, and it held. Reeve never took another command. He walked the halls of memorials. He taught at peace academies. He listened to stories from alien children who now grew up speaking Terran Standard as fluently as their birth tongues. One day, a girl asked him, "Did you win?" Reeves smiled, soft and tired. "No, we didn't win. We remembered." And that was enough. In orbit above Earth, a station drifted quietly, watching the stars. A beacon pulsed from its heart every 60 seconds. A message in every known language. Peace is not the absence of fire. It is the memory of those who burned trying to protect it. There would always be war somewhere. But now there would always be Earth. And the stars would never forget why.